Amidst the clinking of glasses and the flashing of cameras, my son raised his glass and said, "My dad, Ethan, gets 9 grand a month to live comfortably," and the room applauded for a number that had never touched me. I didn't argue. I looked at my phone. The electric bill was still red. If the 9 grand a month was really being sent to me, why was my account still empty? From that moment on, I gave up hope on kind words and started following the money with paper documents. Before we continue, please subscribe to the channel and tell us where you're listening from in the comments. I was standing in the country club lobby, a fog of perfume hanging over the clatter of glassware like rain on a window. The valet handed back my claim ticket. The little black number slashed through with a Sharpie. I glanced down at the embossed invitation with my name on it. For once, Brandon had spelled it right. Along the wall, a step and repeat printed with his charity's logo. Below it, a line of people smiling into cameras. I tugged at the shoulders of the suit jacket I'd borrowed, the seams pulled a bit, and walked past the check-in table. Brandon materialized right on cue as if someone had pressed a button. He clapped my shoulder, the chandelier's gold light sliding over the glossy face of his watch. "I want my father to see I'm doing the right thing," he said, just loud enough for the cluster around us to hear. I nodded. All I wanted out of the night was a small bridge, one honest question, a few words about work without the hand-waving. Sophie drifted over in a black dress, a smile calibrated for lenses. She gave me a nod that managed the room's tempo, then told a staffer, "Seat Dad at table A, near the exit. Keep him comfortable." I knew what that meant, polite but peripheral. I repinned the coat check tag myself, clumsy because I'm not used to strangers fussing with my collar. At the table, 2 flutes of champagne were already set in front of me. I slid the invitation into my inside pocket. Around me, conversation about oil and gas, real estate, returns, and giving back skittered across the table like bright marbles. I was about to ask after my granddaughter's health when the MC asked everyone to take their seats. The clock on the wall read 7:45. Brandon stepped up to the mic, which was waiting for him. "Thank you for being here," he said, and angled his body so part of his face turned toward me. "Family comes first. My father, Mr. Ethan, gets $9,000 a month to live comfortably. I'm just doing my part." He raised his glass. Applause erupted on cue. Camera flashes went off in a string of white pops. Sophie clinked glasses with a partner, her smile like a stamp of confidence. I heard that number the way you hear a string pulled tight across your own throat. 9,000 a month? In the next beat, my mind tried to rescue the moment. Maybe I misheard. Maybe he misspoke. Maybe he meant someone else. The surprise passed like a wave of dizziness and left something heavier behind. A warm tightening in my throat, the familiar, strange knowledge of being used, not loved. A staffer turned to invite me to say a few words. I shook my head and smiled. "Let my son finish." The air lightened. People like compliance. Brandon added a few lines about family responsibility and stable support. Faces around the room nodded, not at me, but at the story they wanted to believe. When he stepped down, a few men came over to shake my hand. "Wonderful. You're well taken care of," said a salt and pepper type. Another asked, "Which bank handles your stipend?" "We manage a lot of support accounts. Very discreet service." I gave the social smile. "My son handles it." I didn't add a word. One stray syllable, and I'd be the spoiler at a party paid for by someone else. The MC circled back and tried again to put a mic in my hand. I declined a second time, barely tipping my head and pointing toward the band. From across the room, Sophie watched me the way you check a metronome. Was my silence staying on beat? I set my glass down and stepped onto the terrace. The slider whispered open, cold air, scraping the back of my collar. The city lay off in the distance, ribbons of light like roads drawn with a ruler. I took out my phone to check the time, and the screen lit up with a red banner. Electric bill past due. I stared at the words a few seconds longer than normal, as if the message might change if I was patient with it. Inside, the laughter stayed round and bright. Out here, my hands were drying in the cold. 9,000 a month and my lights are about to go off? I asked no one but me. I took a screenshot and pocketed the phone. In the glass, I was a small figure inside the reflection of a room full of raised glasses. A breeze ran through the low pines along the terrace. I stayed put until my heartbeat dropped back into its normal lane. I'd come for a small hope, my son telling me something that didn't need a microphone. We could have talked about winter, the heater at my place coughing, the old car hard to start in the mornings. But in that room, we were props for each other. I kept afloat his responsible son story. He kept me a seat near the exit. Back inside at the cocktail table by the door, the topic was still charts. A young partner glanced at a screen and said, "Market confidence is the greatest asset." I nodded it away. I told the hostess I'd be leaving early. She smiled and fetched my coat, fingers quick on the tag. "Have a warm evening," she said. I wasn't sure I could keep that wish in a car with no heat. As I passed the backdrop, Brandon and Sophie stood bracketed by two neat lines of donors, posing group by group. The flash made everything bright enough to look fake. Nora, the event coordinator, stood by the videographer, a sponsor list hugged to her chest. She saw me, hesitated, then gave a thin, polite smile. I nodded back. For a moment, I considered asking her to send me the photo from the moment Brandon said that number, just to mark the time. I let it go. Remembering would be enough. The front hall had thinned out. Cold slid back inside my collar. The valet spotted my claim ticket and jogged off. An engine caught. Raw gas breathed into the night. On the steps, a reporter was trying to snag a quote from someone leaving. I moved past questions that weren't meant for me. I opened the door, settled into the seat, my hands closing around a wheel softened by years. The invitation on the passenger seat looked like an apology in nice type. I started the car and pulled out. Streetlights stretched into gold streaks. At a red light, I flicked open the banking app. The balance wouldn't cover the past due bill I'd screenshotted. I shut the screen. The car shivered lightly over a small pothole. I thought of the man's question. Which bank handles it? If the money exists, where does it go? Home wasn't far, just more red lights than usual with Christmas coming. Out of nowhere, I remembered an old afternoon without gas fumes or shutter clicks, only the scratch of a child's bike tire on concrete. Brandon in third grade circling the driveway, stopping each lap to ask, "Dad, can I go one more?" I said, "Keep going. When you're tired, tell me." He nodded, sweat beading on his forehead, still smiling. When the sun touched the roofline, he braked on his own, planted a foot, sucking air, and said, "I'm tired." Back then, I believed our house had a small habit. Say you're tired when you're tired, happy when you're happy, no sugar on top. As long as it was the truth. I turned into the lot in front of my building. The cement wall bounced back my headlights. I cut the engine and sat a moment, holding the last of the warmth before it bled out. I patted my pocket. The invitation was still there, and slid it into the glove box. Outside, the lock chirped once, hard into the cold. I took the narrow stairwell, my hand along the iron rail. At my door, I flipped the switch. The bulb fluttered once and came up weak. I stood still until my eyes adjusted to just enough light to make out the thin crack along the wall. In the kitchen, I put water on. The kettle took its time. I set the phone on the table and opened the screenshot. The image was as cold as terrace glass. I filed it into a folder named Bills, nothing else. I wrapped both hands around the mug and waited for the heat to seep back into my fingers. Wind threaded the window seams like an uninvited guest. I don't blame the room full of people clapping. They don't live by unpaid electric bills. They don't know the sound of a heater barking and dying. I don't blame Brandon, not tonight. I just note this. There's the story told in public and the story waiting in the statements. Between the two, I'll trust the paper with an official stamp. I shut off the burner and poured the water. Tonight I'd sleep early and get up early. On the table, the invitation paled under the kitchen light. I flipped it over and In pencil, wrote one line, "If the money exists, where does it go?" I took a long breath. The silence in the room wasn't the club's silence. This one belonged to me. It didn't need a camera to exist. It was enough for a man to start checking the truth of his own life. The morning after the gala, my apartment felt like a can left out on the porch. My breath feathered pale against the window. On the kitchen table sat a stack of papers waiting to be squared away, like nails into a joist. I laid last night's invitation on top, my name embossed so prettily it read like an apology, pulled the creaky chair to the laptop, and sat. I powered up, opened the banking app. That cold blue glow washed my glasses. I walked through 3 months of transactions the way you walk a windbreak, tree by tree. No deposit for $9,000. Nothing close to $9,000. No description with my son's name on it. No care fund. Nothing dressed up to look like support. I screenshotted everything and dropped the images into a folder labeled Statements, October, November, December. Then I called the bank and asked for stamped statements with a wet signature from staff. "The money isn't coming in," I said aloud, as if a second person in the room could log it for me. "So where did it go?" I opened my notebook and wrote 7:52 a.m., checked app, no $9,000 deposit, requested stamped statements. I didn't want anything today to live only in memory. Paper would go first. At precisely 9:15, my phone buzzed. Brandon's name lit the screen. I set the phone on the table, hit record, then answered. His voice was warm, like something preheated. "Sleep okay, Dad. Saw you leave early last night. Didn't want you catching a chill." "I'm fine," I said. "Which bank handles the support you say I receive? What day is it sent? How's the beneficiary field listed?" "Dad, don't sweat the technicals," he chuckled. "It's set up long term. There's structure, there's optimization. You don't need to worry. Whatever the optimization, there's a cash flow. Give me one piece of paper, a statement, or a written confirmation." Silence for a beat. Then he looped into talk about the fun, his boys' school plans, the pressures he carries. When I put the question back on the table, his tone shifted. "Honestly, at your age, signing something and forgetting is pretty normal. I just want peace. Trust me." "Name the bank," I cut in, "or send me a copy. If it exists, hand me a page." I stopped the recording just before he reached for the word confused. I noted 9:15, call with Brandon, recorded, asked the 3 core questions. No concrete answers. I left the phone face down. In the quiet, I could hear the kettle begin to murmur, steady as a simple kind of courage. Near noon, Nora texted, "If you're free, coffee's on me." We met at a small place downtown, the glass door clouded with breath, inside the smell of fresh pastry and the clack of tiny wooden order markers. Nora hesitated, rolling the wooden number between her fingers. "I just coordinate events," she said. "I don't want trouble." "I understand," I said. "You don't owe me anything. If you have a neutral detail, say it. If not, thank you for sitting here." She glanced around, then pulled a photocopied invoice from a vendor out of her bag. "I'm not allowed to hand out documents," she said, voice soft as someone walking on sand. "But look at this line. Under Bill Toe was a name, ST Holdings." I studied the page. The remit to address matched Brandon's office building. The memo read, "Visuals Christmas Eve." "I don't know the whole story," Nora said, staring into her paper cup. "But the name ST Holdings pops up oddly often in payment paperwork tied to Sophie. Last night I overheard her tell someone, 'Pay for what looks good, write what reads well.' Like, the whole thing was pre-wired to tell a story." I nodded. "Thank you." "One more time stamp," she added, as if it had just resurfaced. Around 8:30, Brandon called comms and told them to lean on family, support, responsibility. Might matter if you match it to photos and posts. I took a picture of the invoice, just the part with ST Holdings, leaving out anything she didn't want exposed. We stepped out into a shift of wind. She tucked both hands into her coat pockets, as if to warm the small decision she'd just spoken aloud. Dusk came early. I just started up the stairs when the mailman knocked. "Package," he said, handing over a thick envelope with no return address, only my name in bold print. The flap was sealed tight, the ink smelled fresh. I shut the door, set it on the table, snapped a photo, and slid it open. Inside, neat stacks of new bills, large denominations, bound with rubber bands, and a printed form with a signature line. "I agree not to disclose matters related to the private life of the family." That phrase, private life, sat in the middle like a wall built to keep light out. At bottom right, a blank box waiting for my name. I photographed the envelope, the document, the first bill's serial number. I didn't sign. I slipped everything into a clear document sleeve and sealed the edge with tape. I wrote, 3:40 p.m., anonymous envelope, cash, silence paper, not signed, sealed. Mailman, buzz cut, blue jacket, shoe edges worn. Then I called Patrick. He answered on the third ring. "I'm at the office," he said, tired but alert. "Bring everything here. Don't pick up any other calls today." Patrick's office was on the second floor of an old building next to a cobbler's shop. Tarnished brass nameplate, warm yellow light. He poured me water and pointed at the worn wood desk for the sleeve. "Paper first, feelings later," he said, like a professional mantra. "We'll start by preserving what you've got." He skimmed the photos Nora had helped with and underlined ST Holdings on the screen. "I know that building. Holding companies, pass-throughs, names like this are shells people use to pay for optics, but we'll need documents to call it by its right name." He pulled out a printed checklist, request stamped statements, preserve call recordings, seal and log the envelope, keep a written journal, prepare data preservation letters to the bank and to Brandon's company. He wrote today's date at the top and checked the first box. Statements requested. "From now on," he said, "every call, every text, every invoice gets captured, time-stamped, filed. Nothing online. Don't argue on the phone. We're collecting paper." I nodded. I didn't want to flare. I wanted clarity. Patrick typed quickly, printed 2 drafts of preservation demand letters, one to the bank, one to Brandon's firm. I signed the requester line with just enough tremor to remind myself I was alive. He slid the letters into rigid mailers, stamped them, and set them at the corner of the desk, ready to go. "As for the anonymous cash," Patrick said, "we keep the chain of custody clean. You photographed serials. Good. If they deny it later, those numbers will open doors." I asked about the name on Nora's invoice. He leaned back. "ST Holdings. Odds are it holds title to something. If support is being booked as going to you, but actually flows there, the records will show it." We sorted everything in order. Gala night to this morning, the 9:15 call, the 3:40 envelope. Each item got a small slip with its timestamp. The neat little labels looked like fresh lane lines painted down the road. Inside me, something was setting. Flat, firm, enough to stand on. As I got up to leave, my phone vibrated with a text from an unknown number. "Don't touch ST Holdings. No greeting, no name." I showed Patrick. He said only, "Log the time, screenshot it, then leave it." On the walk home, streetlights came on slower than the wind. I passed the coffee shop where I'd met Nora. A lone customer was spinning a wooden order marker the way she had at lunch. A line surfaced in my head like a sign in fog. Silence isn't peace. Sometimes it's just a way to muffle the machine's rattle. Peace comes from squared-away paperwork and light put in the right places. That night I laid it all out on the table. Balanced screenshots, the request numbers for stamped statements, the call recording, the invoice photo with ST Holdings, the sealed sleeve with the cash and the keep quiet form, the 2 draft preservation letters. The invitation sat on top like a marker for where this began. I opened my notebook and wrote 8:10 p.m. Pino, step 1 complete. Stay publicly silent. Keep collecting. I closed the book. In the hallway, the building's light flickered lazily, as if it too was trying to remember how many times it had turned on today. I killed the kitchen light and left a single lamp in the living room. Before bed, I looked once more at the text. Don't touch ST Holdings. I didn't respond. Tomorrow the preservation letters would leave my hands and head for doors I'd never had the nerve to knock on. This time I'd knock with documents, not alone. In the apartment's good quiet, I heard the plumbing tick in the wall, each little tack like a second hand. I thought of an afternoon long ago, Brandon's still small, when we lined pennies on the table and tipped one so they fell in a row, laughing at the tiny clicks. Back then it was simple. A penny was a penny. No mixing, no pretending. I closed my eyes and counted a few more ticks. Tomorrow we'd tip these pages in the direction they were meant to fall. I wanted to hear that click again. Not from coins, but from truth landing exactly where it belongs. Morning, I laid everything out on the kitchen table the way you do before an exam. The Christmas Eve invitation with my name embossed, the screenshot of the past due power bill, the yellow file getting thicker by the day. I told myself, if my son really sends $9,000 a month, there has to be a trail. Words can wriggle, paperwork can't. I went to the business registry. Bright lights, new paper smell, the steady hum of scanners. I typed ST Holdings into the public terminal. Results popped fast. The company is real, not a made-up label. The listed address matches Brandon's office building. The phone number routes to his firm. I printed the whole file, underlined the key lines, clipped it into my folder. First piece drops into place. ST Holdings isn't some distant thing. It runs straight back to my son. From there, I crossed to the property records counter and searched the legal entity I just pulled. A luxury condo downtown appeared on the screen. Owner of record, ST Holdings. Notes field, cash purchase, no mortgage. The purchase date fell a few months after Brandon and Sophie's wedding. I printed the description, circled cash purchase, and wrote the date in the margin. It felt like someone had cracked a door and let me peek inside. If there's a monthly support stream for me, why is an expensive asset sitting in a shell company's name, bought in cash? At noon, I carried the folder to that tower. Marble, glass, chrome glare. I set the folder on the concierge desk and asked for a building fact sheet and the management office's card. The receptionist smiled, handed me a brochure and a business card, and reminded me ownership details are private. I thanked her. I don't need to jump a fence, only what's public and solid. Security walked over, politely asked me not to take photos in the lobby. As I tucked the papers away, my phone buzzed. Sophie. I stepped to the glass for quiet and hit record before I answered. Her voice was soft but firm. Don't wear yourself out. The family already arranged things. Let us take care of it. I don't need talk, I said. I need paper. If there are monthly transfers, show me a statement. A beat of silence. Then, family matters are best kept private. Asking in public invites misunderstanding. I'm asking in the right place about the right thing, I said. If it exists, the paperwork will answer. I ended the call, saved the audio, and wrote a line in my notebook. Sophie dodged, invoked, keep it private. At the desk, the receptionist slid me a sheet explaining HOA payment procedures and the management email. I thanked her and left. No arguing. My target was letters that speak for themselves. That afternoon, I brought everything to Patrick's office. Small, warm, dark wood, the printer purring. I laid out the ST Holdings corporate file, the condo record with cash purchase, the management card, the past due power screenshot, the Christmas Eve invitation, and the Sophie recording. Patrick pushed on his glasses and turned pages like a man setting a ladder. This is enough for preservation demand, he said. We send 3. Brandon's company, the bank, and the building manager. From now on, we communicate in writing only. No phone sparring, no back and forth texts. When they have documents, they'll have to produce them. We drafted the letters, printed, signed, sealed. Patrick built an evidence index, screenshots, corporate registry, condo description, business card, audio file, each in its own sleeve, sealed and dated. He handed me a checklist, log tracking numbers for outbound mail, journal every contact, back everything up twice. At the door, he added, if they reach out with foggy talk, restate their request in writing. Don't let them pull you back into feelings. I nodded. I was changing my gait. No more chasing words, only ink. Near dusk, Nora texted to meet at a cafe downtown. She hurried in, cap low, slid into the booth, and pulled a production calendar from her bag, the audio tech schedule. Her finger tapped a box. Investor Appreciation Night, an event Brandon's company would host this weekend. There's no public guest list, she murmured, but anyone can move through the lobby. Text booked. I can see the company name and time. Please be careful. It's all their friends and partners. I'm not grabbing a mic, I said. I'm bringing paper. I'll set it in front of whoever needs to look. If they believe Brandon's script, they should also look at statements and filings. She nodded, less worried. If you can, don't stay long. They're fast on their feet. I know, drop, show, go. I smiled and took the schedule. She'd done her part, one small, necessary detail. That night back home, I laid it all out again. The folder sat in the center of the table, ST Holdings Registry with the contact address matching Brandon's firm. Condo record in the company's name, cash purchase, management office card and email, screenshot of the past due power bill, Sophie call recording, the Christmas Eve invitation to remember who chose to brag under the chandeliers. I printed extra sets so I could hand them across a table. I wrote 4 plain questions and clipped them to the back. Bank name, transaction ID, stamp statement. If there's support, why is a cash condo titled to the company? My phone buzzed. An anonymous text. Don't touch ST Holdings. No name. No explanation. I screenshotted it, filed it under evidence, and set the phone down. Lines like that don't make my power bill any less red, and they don't conjure deposits into my account. I stood at the window a while. A few pinprick headlights blinked in the lot below. I thought about old nights at the kitchen table. He told me school stories. I washed dishes. Back then, what he said was simply true. My throat tightened and then let go. I don't have the right anymore to stand in the background and believe every word. My job now is to put the papers on the table, in the right room, in front of the right eyes. I packed the backpack, print sets, sealed letters, a marker, paper clips. I stuck a note on the folder. Don't talk much. Ask. Where's the paper? I killed the kitchen light and left one small lamp on. Last Christmas Eve, I left a ballroom quietly, empty-handed. At investor night, I'll walk into that room with documents. If $9,000 a month exists, it will show up on paper. If it doesn't, that room will have to hear the silence of empty lines. And that silence will be louder than any applause. I arrived at the club with a carry bag that had gotten heavier with every new printout. At the door, chandelier light poured over the marble floor like shallow waves of gold. Check-in sat right at the entrance. I wasn't on tonight's list, but I handed the hostess an old invitation from the previous event, the one with my name embossed, and said slowly, I'm family. I'll sit in the lounge and say hello to a few familiar faces. I won't enter the guest area. She looked at me, then at the card, then over to a manager. He came over and asked a handful of polite questions. I kept my voice even. No remarks, no scene. I'm here to greet and go. He waited for a beat, nodded, and waved me into the lounge just outside the ballroom, close enough to set papers in front of the people who needed to see them. Inside my bag were the things I'd prepared over days. Screenshots of my accounts showing no trace of a $9,000 monthly transfer, redacted paper statements leaving the transaction columns clear, The business filing for ST Holdings listing the same address as Brandon's firm. The property record proving a cash-bought condo held in that company's name. On the cover of each packet, I'd written, "Quick reconciliation of the 9,000-month claim." I waited, listening to background music and the clink of glassware that sounded like rain on a window. When guests began drifting between the ballroom and the lounge, I spotted Margaret Walsh, a woman with real pull in the philanthropy world, coming out with two friends. She moved carefully with the look of someone used to reading the numbers under the smile. Not far behind her was Richard Hoffman, an investor everyone knows for saying things out loud. I stood, smiled, and introduced myself. "I'm Ethan. I just want to hand you a reconciliation packet. Thank you for a few seconds." I laid the folder on a low cafe table and said nothing else. On top sat the empty statement page where a monthly transfer ought to appear. Beneath it, the ST Holdings registry page matching Brandon's company address. Last, the condo deed showing cash purchase title to ST Holdings. Margaret flipped quickly, then paused on the first page. She looked at me, then at the line where $9,000 was highlighted in the notes. She didn't comment, only dog-eared the page. Richard walked up. I set a packet down for him too. He drilled straight into the statement page and frowned. He pulled out his phone, snapped a photo of the main page, careful not to catch any private details. "Thank you," he said, flat. The room's chatter seemed to drop one notch. From two people, a trickle of whispers began to spread. "That monthly support isn't on the statements." I didn't chase the whispers. I drifted to a side corridor near the catering doors, a place people don't watch. On the bench against the wall, Nora was reseating her earpiece, looking like she'd just sprinted a task. I sat one chair away. Before either of us spoke, her phone buzzed. The name Brandon lit her screen. Nora hesitated a beat and answered. I heard half the call. "Enough." Brandon's voice dropped low, straining for calm. "Don't let anyone circulate whatever my dad handed out. Tell them he's mistaken. Say it's a family matter." Nora was silent, listening. He added a few lines about keeping the vibe, avoiding confusion, family first. She only said yes to acknowledge, not to promise. I didn't intrude. I wrote the time in my notebook and looked up. Nora hung up and turned to me, meeting my eyes head on. She took a breath. "I heard." Her eyes trembled a little, but her face was steadier than before. I said quietly, "Thank you. You don't have to do anything tonight. Let the papers speak." The music shifted in the ballroom, signaling remarks. I moved back near the doors. Brandon stood on the riser, mic in hand. The lights flattened his face, stripping off depth until all that remained was a bright mask. He talked about gratitude, about partners, about family responsibility. The words slid easily. Sophie stood beside him, smiling encouragement, nodding now and then as if to keep time for the whole room. I stood against the wall, close enough to hear, far enough to blend. When he finished, the MC invited questions. I stayed quiet. I didn't need a mic. Margaret raised her hand first. No preamble. "The other night you said you provide your father with $9,000 a month so he can live comfortably. I've just reviewed a reconciliation packet. Can you state which account that payment lands in?" The room sagged into silence. Brandon smiled, a little stiff. "Yes, we have a long-term arrangement. In families, sometimes the numbers can be viewed in different ways." Richard spoke up, voice even and direct. "Whatever view, it still shows up on a statement. What I see is a cash condo titled to ST Holdings at your firm's address. As for the $9,000 a month, it isn't on the pages the gentleman brought." "So where is it?" A few people rose from their seats, not to cause a scene, but to get a clearer look. Sophie took the mic and smiled soft. "Families do have small misunderstandings. Dad isn't used to checking banking apps and sometimes misses updates. We'll explain privately to anyone interested so we don't dilute the spirit of tonight." I said nothing. I slid one more packet onto a table near the door where a couple of Brandon's partners sat. One of them opened to the first page, scanned, then leaned to murmur to the person beside him. The room noise wobbled. The music's rhythm tilted as if a boat had been tugged off course. A manager came to me and spoke very low. "Sir, I understand you have your reasons, but please don't hand out more documents inside the ballroom." I nodded. I was leaving. He exhaled and nodded back. I stepped into the main lobby. Behind me, Brandon's voice had thinned out. Shorter, fewer beats. Someone called his name with less enthusiasm than before. The clink of glasses shifted to the sound of them being set down. Soft, dry. On the terrace, cold air slipped under my collar. I rested my hands on the rail and let my phone cool in my palm. A text flashed from the utility. Another reminder about the overdue bill. I looked at it for a moment, then darkened the screen and pocketed it. The bitterness didn't make me shake anymore. It only reminded me that whatever happened in that room wasn't a game. Nora cracked the door and stepped out. She stood a few paces away and kept her voice low. "If you need me to, I'll tell the truth. I can confirm the call just now." I nodded. "I'm grateful, but what you've done tonight is enough. Head home. Don't let them pull you into the middle." She pressed her lips together. "Okay." She went back in. I took the stairs down. At the bottom, my phone buzzed. A new number. "Meet me tomorrow night. I have emails about the support. I used to do their accounting." Signed, Alan. I reread it, screenshotted it, flagged it. Another text arrived, this one from Brandon. "Come home and talk, in private. Don't let this get out of hand." Two messages, side by side like two roads. One tugging me back behind a closed door, the other opening toward a desk and a file. I walked past the gate and returned the guard's polite smile. The night was cold, but my head was clear. I'd done what I came to do. No shouting, no microphone. Paper had traveled through the laughter. The right questions had landed on the right ears. And in that chandelier-bright room that once toasted $9,000 a month, more than a few people were now looking down at pages. They would read. They would ask again. They would remember that words can be pretty, but numbers don't clap. I left the club and pushed the folder deep into my backpack. At the turn, I stopped and read Alan's message again. Emails about support. Those words alone could move the story forward. Brandon's text, "Come home and talk," said plenty too. He wanted to drag it back behind a door where only promises and evasions live. I knew which I would choose. It was late. City lights above looked like cold foil. I thought about tomorrow. Meet Alan, listen, request copies of the emails, line them up against the statements, then sit with Patrick. If needed, we'd take it to court. Not to win or lose, but to stand every word in its proper place. I slowed my steps, took a long breath, and kept going. In my head, one simple, ordinary sentence didn't even need emphasis. Anyone can talk, but at the end of the day, only the paperwork decides the truth. I showed up at Brandon and Sophie's the next morning. The living room was cold and surgically tidy, staged so I'd see exactly what they wanted me to see. On the glass coffee table, a teapot, a plate of butter cookies, and a thick white envelope. Brandon started, voice soft and weary. "Dad, last night was a misunderstanding. I want to handle this in-house. Here's a check so you won't worry about bills. Let's just not bring the other thing up again." Sophie sat angled on the sofa, fingers laced on her knee, gaze composed. "For family," she said, "we don't need the noise. Sign this non-disclosure. Don't mention that number again. We'll take care of you." I slid the check out, glanced at the figure, and pushed it back to where it was. Under it lay a pre-filled NDA with a blank signature line. I looked up. "If everything is as you told that room the other night, give me the monthly transfer statements in my name. If the paperwork is clean, I don't need cash, and I don't need an agreement to stay quiet." Brandon lowered his voice, trying to soothe. "Dad, you don't understand my fund structure. We've optimized it so you don't have to worry. Sometimes the way we label things can be misread by outsiders. I asked it plain. Which bank? What day each month? Who's the named payee? Sophie cut in with a cool smile. Don't turn a small thing into a spectacle. We're a family. All you need to say is you misspoke the other night, and we're done. I folded the NDA once and set it neatly beside the cookie plate. I'm not signing. If you have documents, bring them to court. No one has to take anyone's word there. The air cracked like thin glass. Brandon stalled for a heartbeat, anger held on a short leash. I stood. As I reached the door, I heard him mutter, "Internal fund structure," a phrase I'd never seen on paper. I wrote it down in my notebook anyway. By noon, I was at Patrick's desk. His office was warm and quiet, paper and ink in the air. On the table, the files we'd stacked in earlier days, statements with no $9,000 deposits, the ST Holdings business filing matching Brandon's office address, the condo record showing a cash purchase. I recapped the morning, emphasis on the check and the hush agreement. Patrick jotted sparingly, then pulled a task sheet. "We move this fully into legal," he said. "I'm issuing preservation letters to Brandon's company, to the bank, and to the condo's building management. From now on, every shred about support, any transfer orders, any signed documents, frozen. You stay off press and social. We talk through paper." The printer worked nonstop. Patrick proofed every line in the letters. Names, addresses, dates. He slid them into large envelopes and clipped a receipt form on each. Then he opened a timeline board and placed the anchors. The toast where he said $9,000 a month, the power bill past due alert, the ST holding search, the cash condo, this morning's check and NDA. "We'll draft the civil complaint," he said, "and package a referral for authorities if there's forged signatures or funny notarizations." Watching pages get born in front of me, the anger inside me settled into a steady gait. Peace, I realized, lives where paper meets light. That afternoon, I met Alan at a cafe near the bus hub. The man who texted me last night. He looked sleep-starved but clear-eyed and decided. "I used to do accounting at Brandon's firm," he said. "I disagree with how they labeled some flows, especially after the support speech. Here are printouts of internal emails between accounting and payables. Read." The first subject line, "Recommends standardizing label support dad for internal reallocations." In the body, they propose tagging the support label onto HOA fees for the condo titled to ST Holdings, onto certain personal purchases grouped under family benefits, and onto other disbursements unrelated to my accounts. One email even said, "Keep language consistent in public." Alan also handed over a one-pager crosswalk. Internal code, actual purpose, attach proof. I traced support dad across to HOA fee, ST Holdings condo, event services, Sophie spend card. Alan lowered his voice. "I need you and your lawyer to protect my identity. I don't want to blow up anyone's life, but I can't stay quiet if they're using your name to label money that never goes to you." I nodded and thanked him. As soon as I left, I sent Patrick photos. He asked me to bring the originals to scan, bait stamp, and drop into the evidence appendix. I carried Alan's envelope like glass and walked faster through the cold. 2 days later, Patrick and I met the branch manager in a private room at the bank. The lights were even, the table spotless, butter cookies set in the middle. The manager spoke slowly, carefully, and stressed their cooperation within policy. Patrick laid out the written requests. Confirm there are no monthly $9,000 deposits into Ethan's accounts for the stated period. Confirm any transfer orders executed in Ethan's name, if any, and compare signatures on any related documents. A specialist brought a stack. Inside, a letter on letterhead. We find no record of a monthly transfer in the amount stated into accounts held by Ethan during date range. Next, they asked me to sign a sample on the spot for signature analysis. The analyst pointed to the tail of my last name. You always lift the pen at the end, leaving a tiny stopping point. On this one, she indicated a copy of a transfer authorization the other side had supplied to a partner. The tail runs long into a continuous stroke. Your usual stop isn't there. That's off pattern. Patrick noted it immediately. I glanced at the corner seal. The notary stamp was faint and warped, and the notary's name looked like a commission that had nearly lapsed. The manager stayed within lane. We don't make criminal determinations. With a subpoena, we'll deliver originals for comparison. Patrick thanked them, asked for stamped copies, and sealed them into their own folder. Outside under the awning, I stood with the wind in the trees. The confirmation letter rasped at the edge in the gusts. The last pieces were coming into view. Internal emails calling non-Ethan expenses support. A bank letter confirming no $9,000 deposits. A signature that didn't match my hand. A wonky notary. The pattern wasn't suspicion anymore. It was alignment. Late that night, my doorbell rang. Through the peephole, Brandon and Sophie. I started a lawful recording, opened the door on the chain. Brandon held an envelope. Sophie's mouth was a hard line. Dad, Brandon said quietly, there were some labeling mistakes. Not worth a blow-up. I'll set you up with an authorized user card, high limit. You say one line that you misspoke the other night. We close this here. Sophie stepped forward, voice turning razor even. If you insist, we'll have to evaluate your capacity. The press loves stories like that. You won't like it. She delivered it like weather. No rise, no fall. I kept steady. I told you, I don't sell the truth. I've filed through counsel. See you in court. Brandon frowned, ready to push, but Sophie tugged his sleeve. Before they left, she slipped the envelope through the gap. I left it there. When their footsteps faded, I picked it up, photographed it sealed, logged time and bringers and contents. I forwarded the photos and the audio to Patrick the same night. He replied within minutes. Good. Keep the envelope intact. Tomorrow we file it with the complaint. And be ready. The next morning, Patrick texted, filed. Summonses would go out that week. A prelim date was set. I sat in the chair by the window. Outside, the sky was bright and cold. I opened the case binder and looked at the pages that had carried me here. Screenshots, statements with no 9,000 line, the ST Holdings registry, the cash condo, the internal emails, the bank's no deposit letter, the signature anomaly notes, the odd notary, recordings of the offers to buy my silence. I closed the binder and let out a breath. Now let the law do the talking. I didn't say it to rally anyone or to shove anyone under. I said it for myself, to remember I hadn't come this far by being loud, but by laying out clear pages. I left that party in silence. I did not choose silence. I chose light. And when light hits words, they either stand or fall. The night they toasted 9,000 a month, applause filled the room. The law doesn't need applause. It needs the truth, and the truth now is present on paper. That morning, the courthouse steps were still slick with dew. Camera rigs stood in rows, cables draped across the gray stone like cold tendons. Patrick strode beside me, his left arm hugging a case file thick with color-coded tabs. Each tab was a slice of truth. The bank's confirmation, the handwriting report, the internal emails, the papers on the condo held by the company. I drew a long breath. A reporter pushed a mic forward. Any comment before the hearing? Patrick answered for me, low and tight. We respect the process. The record will speak. I nodded and didn't add a word. The security gate let out a single beep and fell silent. The courtroom glowed with even light, smelling faintly of polished wood. The jury sat in two ranks, faces pointed straight ahead. Brandon took the chair on the right, dark suit, a white pocket square sticking a hair out of line. Sophie sat beside him, makeup careful but a shade pale. They looked forward and avoided my eyes. I heard the gavel open the session. Assistant District Attorney Jennifer stood first. Your Honor, Jennifer said, this is not a family squabble. This is a pattern of deception used to burnish an image and trade on the label of supporting a father, while not a single transfer ever reached his account. We will present the papers and the people behind them. Defense counsel asked to be heard. He stepped out, voice mild. Things are more complicated. This family employs a long-term financial structure. The support doesn't move directly each month. It's arranged through items for the common good. My clients may have used imprecise words at a party, but there was no ill intent. Patrick tapped my arm, a small reminder. Answer the question asked, no speeches. I nodded, eyes fixed on the bench. In my head, I counted slow, tab by tab, page by page. The evidence phase began. A representative from the bank took the stand. She wore something plain, a fine striped blouse, a badge on a lanyard. Her voice was steady, neither high nor low. At the court's request, we reviewed all activity in the accounts under Ethan's name for the relevant period. We found no transfers in the publicly declared amount of $9,000 per month. This is our official confirmation, stamped by the bank. She set the packet on the evidence table. Jennifer asked short questions. The answers were clean and precise. Defense rose. Is it possible the payments went into some other account Mr. Ethan doesn't recall? Or a linked account? She replied, if there were a lawful linked account in his name, the system would reflect it. It does not. Next came the forensic document examiner. A large screen flickered on, magnifying the signature on a transfer order the defense had once shown to a third party when questioned. The expert held a blue pen over the printout and traced the tail of my last name. Mr. Ethan typically lifts his pen at the end, leaving a tiny stop and a near-unconscious accent. This is the sample he signed in court this morning. On this document, the final stroke runs on, no characteristic stop. I also note a deformation in the notary seal and a notary name whose commission expired very close to the document date. I do not rule on charges, but technically this is not the same hand, and the seal warrants further review. A juror's pen clicked softly. I glanced over and saw a line drawn on the timeline board beside them, where the anchors were posted. The night of the party, the condo purchase date, the bank's confirmation. The building management representative took the stand. His delivery was bureaucratic and dry. Following the dates in question, the corporate account ST Holdings shows payments for HOA fees, insurance, and services related to a downtown condominium. Purchase date. Method, cash, no mortgage. Jennifer asked, do any of those payments touch Ethan's accounts? He answered, no. Payer of record is ST Holdings. Defense stood again, holding a smile. As I've said, support can take an optimized route. As long as the father benefits, Jennifer cut in, still within decorum. Your Honor, could is not a substitute for documents. The record so far shows no $9,000 per month into the father's account and shows multiple expenses labeled support that in substance serve other assets. The judge nodded to proceed. Then Alan. He walked up, swallowed once, and looked straight ahead. I worked as an accountant at Brandon's company. These are internal emails suggesting a unified label, Support Dad, for internal transfers. Jennifer asked, did those flows go into Ethan's account? Alan said, no. They tied to condo fees under the company name, event services, and a spend card. Why use that label? Alan looked down at the paper, then up. So when speaking to outsiders, they'd have a simple story. I objected, but it wasn't my call. Defense moved in, voice soft but barbed. You're bitter about leaving, aren't you? Alan breathed in. I left because I wouldn't call someone else's spending by a father's name. Nora was called next. She stood with her hands laced to steady them. Jennifer asked, did you receive a call from Brandon the night of the appreciation event? Nora nodded. Yes. He told me not to let anyone circulate the papers Mr. Ethan brought and to tell people he was mistaken. I didn't comment. I just listened. Defense tried a nudge. In a noisy party, could you have misheard? Nora answered slowly. I've run events for years. I know where to stand to cut the noise. I heard clearly. The room held its breath. I realized it was the short sentences that carried the most weight. Then Sophie. Defense asked that she provide context. Jennifer lifted a printout. Did you write this email? The phrase, your dad is finally useful? Is that yours? Sophie pressed her lips. I did. I was angry when I typed it. I didn't mean to insult. Were you aware that items labeled support did not go to Mr. Ethan's account? Sophie avoided Jennifer's eye and looked toward Brandon. I handle image. I don't read every transfer. I trust my husband. My name was called. I stood and took the stand. Defense gave a courteous smile. Mr. Ethan, isn't it possible you're mistaken? Age makes people forget. I looked him in the eye. I might forget where I left my car at the supermarket. I cannot misremember a blank bank statement with no $9,000 deposits into my account. He lifted his brow. Yet you're getting by, meaning you're supported another way? I shook my head. On the night of that party, my phone flashed an overdue notice from the power company. If there had been support as claimed, I wouldn't have had to turn the lights off early. I'm not asking for favors. I want the truth to stand straight in this room. Jennifer didn't ask much more. Patrick didn't let me wander. When I returned to my seat, my heart beat even. There was no rush of victory, just a slow, quiet levelness, like water after wind. Closing arguments ended. The jury withdrew to deliberate. I watched the wall clock and felt time climb the stairs like an old man. Brandon bent toward his lawyer. Sophie sat still, fists pinching her hem. I stopped looking over. The door opened. The jury filed back in. The clerk of court stood with a paper in hand. Her voice spelled each word. As to elder financial abuse, guilty. As to forgery, guilty. As to tax fraud, guilty. As to conspiracy, guilty. Pen scratched dryly in the record. The white pocket square in Brandon's breast pocket slipped a thread off-center. Sophie shut her eyes for a second, then opened them and held steady. The judge rapped the gavel and set a date for sentencing. Until then, defendants are restricted from contacting witnesses and the complainant. Counsel will prepare for sentencing. People rose, the cushioned chairs sighed. I gathered the file and let my hand rest on its edge, reminding myself, it's all recorded. Outside on the steps, the noon sun had come up. Cameras swung back toward us. Patrick said one sentence, just loud enough. The papers have spoken. I added nothing. At the fringe of the crowd, I caught Margaret Walsh's eye. She dipped her head. The doubt was gone. Richard Hoffman stood beside her, stacking business cards, murmured to someone, and turned away. Those who had clapped at the party now stood a polite distance from Brandon and Sophie. My phone buzzed with a text from someone in that circle. Pulling sponsorship, then another. Partnership canceled. Not loud, just short lines. I stood in the sun a moment longer, feeling the word guilty still hanging in the air, heavy and clear. I thought about my small apartment, the lamp by the window, the power bill now paid on time with a pension and extra shifts. Life doesn't turn rich after one day in court. It turns clearer. Patrick's hand brushed my shoulder. We still have sentencing, then the civil side, he said. But your hardest part is done. You got the truth into the ledger. I nodded. The rest would be quiet days, orderly and slow. I would brew coffee in the morning, straighten the curtain, walk to the market for discounted fruit. And if anyone asked how I got here, I'd say, I brought the paperwork into the light. I turned and left the steps. Behind me, questions kept flying. For someone else. In front of me, the sun ran thin across the stone. I held the case file, not for fear of dropping it, but because it's my new habit. Keep the truth in hand. The law had entered the record. As for the life beyond, I'll write it one page at a time. No applause needed, just numbers where they belong and words that mean what they say. If you enjoyed the story, please like this video. Subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts about it in the comments. To hear the next story, click the box on the left.